to read exercise 9-8 dealing with predetermined overhead rate and overhead variances. And after you've read the text that you see on the screen, go ahead and advance this presentation to the next slide by clicking on the button that points to the right. Requirement 1 says to compute the predetermined overhead rate and break it down into variable and fixed cost elements. And on this slide, you can see the calculations at the bottom, and you see that we're using the total overhead cost of $658,800. It's broken into variable and fixed cost, and when we divide it by the 60,000 machine hours, we are able to calculate the predetermined overhead rate in total, as well as in the variable and fixed elements. Next, we take a look at requirement 2, and requirement 2, which appears in the white writing near the bottom of this slide, says compute the standard hours allowed for the actual production. And down at the bottom you see an image of how you would solve this one. We take the 60,000 machine hours divided by 30,000 units to come up with 2 machine hours per unit. The standard hour allowed for the actual production would then be the $32,000 units times 2 machine hours per unit, and the answer comes out to be 64,000 machine hours. Next, on requirement 3, we're asked to compute the variable overhead spending and efficiency variances in the fixed overhead budget and volume variances. And the image that you see on the screen now is the solution to requirement 3. Now, I'm limited by screen real estate, so I can't show the information of where these numbers come from. So I would encourage you to navigate back to slide 2, where you can see the information on the screen, and then jump between slide 2 and this one, slide 5, to see how the calculations work. But basically, variable overhead spending variance is equal to the actual rate, actual hours times the actual rate, less the actual hours times the standard rate. And when we work through the calculations, we come up with 6,200 favorable variance. The variable overhead efficiency variance is calculated by taking the standard rate times the difference between the actual hours and standard hours. And when we work through that calculation, we get $15,000 of an unfavorable variance. Next, we look at the budget variance, which would be equal to the actual fixed overhead cost less the budgeted fixed overhead cost. And that comes out to be $2,700 unfavorable. And finally, the volume variance, we take the fixed portion of the predetermined overhead rate and we multiply it times the difference between the denominator hours and the standard hours allowed. And when you work through that calculation, we come up with $23,920 favorable.